When I was growing up in Bangalore in a lower middle class family, we were told to mind our own business and not go around poking your noses in others' businesses. So my only interaction with the government was on the BTS buses, or when the postman came home to deliver some posts, or the occasional trips to the electricity board to pay the bills. It changed a bit when I went in to do my MBA at SPJ in Bombay, when our summer project used to be either you work with an NGO or a government entity and spend your 1 month applying management principles to unstructured environments. That's what they called it. And I chose to work with the Bangalore City Corporation. This was in '99. I had the fortune of working with a very bright young IAS officer who was the Joint Commissioner, and I had a fascinating peek into how governments worked or did not work. But I was not involved. It was just a project. 1 month, I got back to my life. I forgot all about it. In 2000, 2001, when I started off MeritTrac as India's first skills assessments company, somebody told me that, hey, why don't you go talk to the IT departments of the state of Andhra Pradesh, state of Karnataka, IT, BPO is booming, maybe there are ways in which you can work with the government. I still remember feeling very jittery when I went to meet with the IT department guys in this building in Bangalore. This is called the MS building, and this is what housed the IT departments. By the way, why this is called the MS building? MS building stands for the multi-story building. This is perhaps the first multi-story building in Bangalore. But when I went in to meet with the secretaries and the officers in the department, I was pleasantly surprised. They were responsive, driven, very progressive, and they were very open to work with a 27-year-old guy who just walked in to say, I'm doing a startup, when startups was not fashionable, and I want to work with you. So much so that within a year, at MeritTrac, we were successful in launching 2 statewide testing programs called GET and BSAT with the governments of Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka, and successfully rolled it out. Since 2002, I've worked with hundreds of government officials, projects, and I've been slowly but surely changing my perceptions about the myths and stuff that exists about how we think the government works. So what are those perceptions in the youth on how government works? I did an interesting experiment a few years ago with some students in a B school in Mysore called SDM. These kids were available to me for a month. I got 75 students working with me for a month. And before we began the project, I asked them 2 questions. One, have you ever worked with the government? And the answer was no, only for personal purposes of engage. Otherwise, we've not had any engagement. And over 80% of them felt that the government was corrupt, inefficient, and I don't want to be doing anything with them. So we got started out with the project. The project was simple. 4 weeks. First week, we split them up into groups of 3, gave them 25 districts of Karnataka, and said, do whatever research you want online and find out everything you can about what's happening in the districts. Week 2, you had to visit the district and find out what's happening really on the ground and get a perspective of the realities on the ground from the people living there. Some of them did make the trips. Week 3, if you were the DC of the district, deputy commissioner of the district, what are the 3 things you will do in that district and why, and how will you achieve it? It was an assignment that they had to do and present to the rest of the 75 batchmates. And week 4 was very interesting. Week 4, every district has a website. And on those websites are listed a ton of information apart from a list of all the officials who work in various departments in that district. Each of those 75 students had to visit their respective district websites, pick up 10 phone numbers of officials, and make calls to them. So 750 calls were made, and the conversation they had to have was, I'm calling as a citizen of India. I've understood that these are the issues in your district. I have a few questions to ask. And sometimes the questions are very specific. That last year, your health budget was so much, only this much has been spent, why? So on and so forth. My brief to them was, check for 4 things. 1, were the contact details correct? 2, did the person pick up the call? 3, did you get an answer to your question? And 4th, how satisfactory was the answer? 750 calls were made that week. And when we collated the results, this is what came out. We were able to reach 78% of the numbers on the website. 83% of them actually answered the call, after 1, 2, 3 attempts. Over 94% of them got an answer, gave an answer to their question. And the range of answers were interesting. None of your business, 20%. Who the hell are you to ask me this question? I'm very busy now, call me later, and the call never goes through, 25%. Some responses, explanations, another 20%. Friendly but no information given, 15%. But very interestingly, 20% of them were very positive and gave very precise information. So much so that some of the officers actually called these kids to their districts and said, we will host you. You come, take a look at what's happening, and tell me what you think we should be doing. At the end of that exercise, each of these students had a very different perception of what the government was and the challenges that the government faced in executing things on the ground. So how do you really go about engaging with the government? How do you work with the government is the question. And I want to share a couple of our experiments and experiences. In the Headed Eye Foundation, which is all about rural poverty eradication, I run an initiative called GAP. It's called Global Action on Poverty. GAP's objective is to democratize the process of poverty alleviation through change makers. And a change maker is an individual or an organization who is committed and is working on impacting 1,000 lives in his or her lifetime and moving them out of poverty through a variety of ways: agriculture, education, healthcare, so on and so forth. And our dream at GAP is to enable the change maker's journey and accelerate the journey by removing a variety of obstacles that come their way, be it in learning, networks, resources, mentors, so on and so forth. Our vision is to have 1 million change makers on our platform in the next 10 years who can impact 1,000 lives in their lifetime. So we can impact a cumulative of 1 billion people. We made a beginning, and we've had 250 change makers on our network now in 68 districts across the country. And all of them work at the grassroots in rural India. A few months ago, I asked them the question, how critical and how important do you think is working with the government in the projects that you do? Almost all of them said the government is the most critical machinery that exists out there to make a difference. In our efforts to work with them, we've had issues where they're slow, not responsive, difficult to get to, so on and so forth. But the third thing they said was very interesting. They said, but there's no process for entities like us to engage with the government. There's no mechanism at a local level, which kind of triggered a thought, which is the blueprint we're putting now, to create an engagement network in every district in the country where all the change makers, the other stakeholders, and the government officials get together, meet every month, and discuss ways in which collaborations can happen between all of these entities to make a difference. Let me take another example where I engage as a senior advisor with the Tata Trust. Tata Trust is probably the oldest philanthropic trust in India, and we've been working in the trenches for several years. And especially over the last few years, we've signed a range of MOUs with a lot of state governments: Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha, AP, Telangana, Assam, Tripura, so on and so forth. I spoke to my colleagues on their experience of working in partnership with the government across all of these states, and there were 4 learnings that came out. One, that when we work at this level, we got to work with a long-term policy-level approach and not get involved in short-term projects. 2, how do you design the interventions thoughtfully and in the spirit of the partnership? 3, that you got to build equations with the field-level officers because that's where the action is happening. And 4th, you somehow got to find the right people to work with. Which brings us to the question, how do you find the right people to work with in the government? Of course, there's been a fantastic example in the form of Nandan Nilekani, who came in from the corporate, went into government, set up UID AI, Aadhaar, which is the backbone of a variety of reforms happening in the country. How can we find more Nandan Nilekanis to work with the government? I found a very interesting article in the Business Standard. MyGov.in has called in applications from a variety of professionals to join the government, and they've received over 8,000 applications from Ivy League professors, Silicon Valley techies, who are all keen to figure out how to work for the government. So I see a lot of good people getting into the government to make this much better interactions happen between all the stakeholders involved. India in the next 10 years, and the ticker has already started moving, has to absorb 120 million youth into its workforce in the next 10 years. That's 1 million a month. We need to create these youth to be examples not only of job creators, we need as many entrepreneurs as possible, but we need to engage the youth in the process of working with the government. And one example that shines out for me is the story of Basavaraj. Basavaraj comes from a remote village in northern Karnataka called Gule, which is in Koppal district. A school dropout, he never knew how to speak a word of English, had never touched a computer in his life, was generally figuring out what to do when he happened to chance upon the transformation program that we run at Headlife Foundation, where we take quite literally zero-educated, illiterate village youth and transform them to be English-speaking, computer-literate knowledge professionals in about 6 months' time. He came into our program, went through a grueling 6 months, transformed himself, started working in a BPO, did it for a few years, went back to his village and said, you know what, I'm done working for others. I want to set up my own Kirana store, and set up a grocery store in his village a few years ago. This is Basavaraj sharing the example of the Kirana store that he set up.
Hi, good evening. This is Basavaraj from Gule, which is in Koppal district and Karnataka. I joined in 2009 at Life Training Center to learn speaking English and to learn computer skills. After finishing my training, I joined in BPO company for 4 years as a data entry executive. Recently quit my job and came to my village, opened my provision store in my village. I want to do more business in my village, and if Edelweiss is supporting me, I want to sell more products from Edelweiss like solar and electricals, mobile service. Thanking for Edelweiss. Thanking you.
Today we've transformed about 3,000 youth like that, and we have about 400 of them working in the last mile distribution network that we're building with rural consumers called RubanBridge. And I see a massive opportunity here. But the story of Basavaraj doesn't end there. Last year, he contested his Taluk Panchayat elections. He won, and he's now full-time into it. And he says, my objective is to transform every youth in my village like me. And he's created another job for his brother running the Kirana store. So all of you might be thinking, so where do I begin? There's so much to be done. How do I start? Someone once asked the Dalai Lama, I'm so small, I'm insignificant. How can I make a difference? And this is what the Dalai Lama in his infinite wisdom said. Be a mosquito. And then constantly bug the system so much that it starts changing. So ladies and gentlemen, let us engage with the government, either working with, working for, or just being a mosquito, but let's not be indifferent. I remember a beautiful song that Dr. Rajkumar, the doyen of the Kannada film industry, said many years ago. And the song went like this. Love me or hate me, kiss me or kill me. Oh, darling, please do something to me. Da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da. So please start doing something about it. Thank you so much.